This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Welcome to another episode. It feels like it's been a while since we've talked to all of you, but so happy to be back on the air talking Bengals football with all of you. And gosh, John, I don't know what there's to talk about this week. There's just, it's the off season. There's just nothing to talk about. And I don't know. I guess we're just going to have to kill some time, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Wasn't there like a football game this weekend? There's a couple, but there was like one like a couple nights ago.
There might be. There might have been. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some potential free agent targets this week for the Bengals as we look to the offseason, as well as continue our prospect watch in a little bit of a different way than we have normally done so far. So we've got a lot to get to tonight. We're going to try and answer some of these questions from fans and comments that are coming through. So get those to us how you can. But in case you're new to this program, he's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. Welcome to the Orange and Black Insider. Our weekly show is on the air once again, and it is great to talk to all of you. If you are, as I mentioned, if you are new to this program, get the show wherever you get your audio podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio. All of those platforms carry it. We're also on YouTube, and all of our stuff is on cincyjungle.com. This program is part of the SB Nation Cincy Jungle podcast channel, which includes this show, Orange is the New Black, as well as Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk. So excited to be part of that slate of shows. John, first of all, I need you to show everybody the shirt you're wearing, because that is pretty epic. I don't know how soon after the game you had that thing made, but I assume you had it made.
I did not, Anthony. There was the fine people at Cincy Shirts, which is a relatively new merchandising store in downtown Cincinnati. They have a few locations. The one I went to was on, I don't even remember the street. It's an OTR, basically. And I saw the shirt being plugged by Mo Egger, who had a shirt on like literally Tuesday after the national championship game. I'm like, yeah, I got to get this shirt. So I ordered it online, and I realized that, wait a minute, I'm going to be on YouTube on Wednesday, and it would be great if I was wearing the shirt by then. So I went down to the store, and my guy Timothy behind the counter hooked me up, canceled that order, got me a shirt in store. The fine folks at Cincy Shirts will be happy to take your order for the Smoking Joe Burrow black and white shirt. They have the short sleeve one. They have like the baseball one with like the kind of like 3/4 long sleeve style. So anytime anything cool happens in Cincinnati, they'll put it on a shirt and they'll take care of you. So definitely hit those guys up.
All right. Well, I guess we could say that part of what we're talking about is by cincyshirts.com, and another sponsor might be what's in that red Solo cup of yours, my friend. Yeah. How many Bud Light seltzers deep are you tonight?
I don't know what you're talking about. This is just strawberry juice in the Solo cup. We are on. This is a family show.
Yeah.
Anthony.
Yeah. I don't know. By the way, I don't know if you know, when we publish episodes to YouTube, this is probably something we should talk about off the air, but whatever. When we publish episodes to YouTube, it says, is this meant for kids? Is this kid appropriate? All that kind of stuff. When we're talking about Bud Light seltzer and red Solo cups, I don't know if that's kid friendly, but that's okay. That's okay. I am under the weather. Otherwise, I may have been joining you with some of the seltzer action, the adult seltzer action, but I hope you're enjoying it.
I tell you what, whatever's in this cup does not taste like alcohol. I'll just tell you that right now.
Sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's extremely dangerous, but either way, it looks like you're enjoying yourself in your new shirt, your adult beverages, and yeah, I don't know. Let's get to it, though. Let's let the Joe Burrow love fest begin, John. Where to begin on this whole thing? Yet again, the guy shows up on the big stage, and I got to tell you, for those of you who did not watch the national championship, maybe didn't see the beginning of the game, it was a rough beginning, and it was dicey for Burrow at the beginning, getting hit a lot of pressure, having to move off of spots a little earlier than he would have wanted to, missed passes, some errant throws, but as he has done all year, he got into a rhythm. He hit some big plays, and what do you know? 460 plus yards. What was it? 6 total touchdowns, five through the air and 1 through the ground. John, college football playoffs. 14 touchdowns. 14 touchdowns in 2 games. Unbelievable. And 0 interceptions. Just added to the resume.
Like this is Brett Venables' defense. Last year against Alabama, against Tua, at the time when he was being propped up as the consensus number 1 pick for this year, they shut him down. Like Tua had his worst game of his college career against that defense, and for the most part, that entire defense was brought back. Aside from a few players on the defensive line, yeah, Clemson got really lucky in the first couple drives by pinning them against the 5-yard line. Really limited what LSU could do. Burrow had his first throw of the game was called back, unfortunately, but it was just the pinnacle of Burrow just escaping pressure and throwing to his right and throwing 40 yards down the field. Unfortunately, got called back, and at that point, you started to wonder, okay, LSU's out of rhythm now. Trevor Lawrence got a touchdown a couple drives later. Now they're playing from behind for the first time since like I think late October. And then once they finally got comfortable and they got some space to work with, it was just like clockwork. It was like the first 14 games that we saw this year. It's just like whenever Burrow does this now, I felt this back in late November. Like anytime he has performances like this, it's just not surprising anymore. It's literally just the expectation. And that's so insane for a second-year starter, a transfer going into a new school, a school and an offense that has never in its life imagined any type of passing offense or any type of just offensive identity in general like this. And they just lit up the number 1 defense in college football, one of the best defenses that we've seen in this century of college football. Brett Venables can easily be an NFL defensive coordinator. That defense easily has multiple draftable players on it, and it just didn't matter. Like LSU's offensive line got battered throughout the game for the most part, and they won like the offensive line Joe Moore Award for best offensive line of the year. And he dealt with pressure just like he has all year, and he just didn't. He just was never phased, and his accuracy was off the charts again. Deep down the field, he did have a couple misses in there. He did have a couple drops. His completion percentage was just a pathetic 63% for this game, which unfortunately cost him the record for. I think it cost him the Colt McCoy's completion percentage record. But first quarterback to get 60 touchdowns in a season, Heisman Trophy, national championship. I don't know if when you weight the supporting cast that he had against like other supporting cast for the greatest college season for a quarterback, but it's unquestionably up there, and you can't dispute it at this point.
Yeah, when you look at I've put this up on our screen here. It's a tweet from me because I'm that self-absorbed that I have to put my own stuff up. But I did the math: 14 touchdowns, 12 passing, 2 rushing, 956 yards, 0 interceptions in the 2 college football playoff games. Finishes the season, John, 5,600 plus, almost 5,700 passing yards, 65 total touchdowns, 60 of them through the air, and only 6 interceptions. And then, of course, he's got the Heisman National Championship trophy and the title game MVP honors to his name. So he kind of hit the trifecta, had, I would say, the best season we have ever seen from a college football quarterback. He maybe didn't do as much with his legs that a Lamar Jackson, a Cam Newton, and others who had great Vince Young, some of those guys that had the multidimensional thing. Burrow does more with his legs than you may think on the surface, but all in all, this has to be the most impressive. I mean, at least in the last 25, 50 years, season by a college football quarterback that I can think of.
For the metrics that matter in terms of translating to pro success, it's by far the most impressive because not only is it a 10-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, a 76% completion percentage, this is against one of the tougher schedules that we've seen in the modern era. Like this is against, I think, 7 AP top 10 schools. They beat all 4 of the preseason, all 4 of the top 4 preseason teams for like the preseason poll. They finished the season against Georgia, who was like number 5 at the time, against Oklahoma, number 4, and against, again, the best defense in the nation in Clemson. They never blinked. Like Burrow's, I guess, worst game, quote unquote worst, was against Auburn when he only had a passing touchdown interception, and I think only like in the low 70% for completion percentage. But you just look at his game log, and it just looks like, I think Steve Palazzolo for PFF said it best, it just looked like he played an FCS schedule. It was just consistent in these remarkable ways that we just had never seen. He got Joe Brady a job. I know there's a lot about Joe Brady making Joe Burrow into what he is, but it's more of a symbiotic relationship because I thought midway through this game that some of the throws that Burrow was making, he was just bailing out that offense in general. And I think it was a chess match going on between Brady and Venables on the other side of the ball, and Venables was winning for the most part, and it was just up to Burrow, just from this position that LSU in general just has not been in all year, playing from behind, playing against tight coverage where not everything, all these concepts that they're doing are working, and he just didn't miss any throws. He just he doesn't miss when other quarterbacks do, and there's a lot of NFL quarterbacks that would go against the scheme, the talent that Clemson has on defense. It would not have nearly the same success. And you're thinking like midway through the game, or like not even into the fourth quarter, you're thinking, Burrow has been all right, but he's been kind of off, and you still get his stats. He's like already eclipsing 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in the air, and then they end up putting 42 on them. So again, like it's extraordinary, and for what matters in terms of translating into the pro games, this is the season this is the new standard of the best quarterback season that we've seen.
Yeah, he really did it all, and I mentioned this earlier, John. He did some more. He did things with his legs more often than I think people would have given him credit for. Whether that's maneuvering in the pocket, whether that's extending a play, or as we saw, you said the completion percentage was lower than we have become accustomed to in 2019 from Joe Burrow. So what does he do? He ends up running for first downs. He ends up extending drives with his legs and doing more on the ground, and really showing a bit more wheels than I think a lot of people, maybe if you didn't watch a lot of the games throughout the season from Joe Burrow and you really kind of tuned in these last two, really kind of showed more on that front, I think, to the casual fan that was just tuning in. And, some people are saying he's the best prospect since Andrew Luck to come out of the draft in terms of the quarterback position. I said I see some things that remind me of Peyton Manning in a lot of ways. Lofty expectations. There's some people who say maybe Montana, maybe Brady, all kinds of lofty expectations. But as we sit here today, and as we've said many, many times over the past few weeks, he is ripe for the taking for the Cincinnati Bengals as they sit with the number 1 overall pick. That being said, John, inevitably, when it's the Cincinnati Bengals, when they have a high pick, and when it's Mike Brown, all of that, the talking heads come out. And I'm already seeing talking heads come out on the national media with a certain narrative. I'm seeing some things already in our live chat. Tom Brooks in our live YouTube, I heard on the Patriot podcast, Patriots Unfiltered, that they think Joe should boycott the Bengals because they are such a bad franchise. I'm seeing other people. I'm sick. Brian Kramer getting really tired of the trolling about the Bengals, all that kind of stuff. So let me play this because there are a couple things I want to put up on the screen. One is a video from everybody's favorite talking head in the national media, Stephen A. Smith, talking about the Bengals, Joe Burrow, and all of everything that goes with that. And then I've got one more thing to share, and then you and I, John, will talk about this. So bear with me as I set this up here, this video up.
Because of Mike Brown. The Cincinnati Bengals are an embarrassment. They're just a horrible, horrible franchise. They're notoriously cheap. We all know this. And I understand that Zach Taylor didn't have a good season, only won 2 games, 2-14. They've had 4 consecutive winning seasons after having 5 consecutive winning seasons under Marvin Lewis. I want to make sure no one confuses my position. I have never, nor will I ever apologize for my position about Marvin Lewis. He deserves to be fired as head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals because I believe if you've been on the same job for 16 years and you've never won one single playoff game, it is time for a change. That does not mean I believe that Marvin Lewis shouldn't be a head coach in the National Football League. I think he would have been a really good coach for the Cleveland Browns. I just think that in the same location, at some point in time, you got to try something new if indeed you are trying to compete. The reason why Marvin Lewis lasted 16 years is because Mike Brown wasn't trying to compete. Mike Brown was sitting up there and underpaying folks all the time. It is not a quality franchise. And I think you can serve to sully and stain and potentially ruin a guy like I'm with you. I'm with you on that. That's all I'm saying. So when I'm looking at Joe Burrow, all I'm trying to say to you is this: football is a it's a real team sport. You need a multitude of levels all working in concert with one another. That's not going to happen in Cincinnati. If we truly care about this Ohio native, this kid Joe Burrow, make sure he goes anywhere but to Cincinnati.
Well, what I'm talking
that's my point.
Okay, so you've got that from Mr. Smith, who has been a notorious long-time critic of the Bengals. I've got one more thing to share, and this is just, again, these two things, I'm only sharing two, but this is, as we all know, this has been a kind of a chorus line of, I can't believe he's going to the Bengals. Here's Robert Mays of The Ringer. I cannot believe we have to send this dude to Cincinnati, obviously showing I believe it actually starts with, the clip of him smoking a cigar, which is on John Sheeran's shirt. I cannot believe we have to send this dude to Cincinnati. Robert Mays says some things later on about, I really meant the team. I didn't mean the city or the fans or anything like that. Well, you kind of lump everybody in. In terms of things that, and I know you've got a specific take on this, we're going to take on First Take, I guess, based on what Stephen A. Smith said on ESPN's First Take with Max Kellerman. Look, I mean, I understand his position with Marvin Lewis and all of that, but he said something that's key that I think is playing into this whole narrative. The 4 straight losing seasons. If the Bengals were coming off of maybe 1 or 2 after that 5-year playoff run, we may not have this chorus line. If you remember, John, there was a time back in 2013, 2014, 2015 where this team was praised by Mel Kiper, by Todd McShay, by everybody, Daniel Jeremiah, about their draft prowess and all of that. Now, all of a sudden, when you start losing games, you've got more draft busts. It becomes real easy and low-hanging fruit to be critical of this. And now you're planting this idea in either fans' minds, the public, maybe even Joe Burrow's mind, that he should really rethink his landing in Cincinnati and maybe pulling Eli Manning. Pretty frustrating to listen to, especially when, as a Bengals fan or as someone who follows the team, you're kind of sitting here going, you're feeling pretty good, right? You just saw this guy win a national championship. You think he's on his way. Pretty frustrating.
I think you led into my thoughts on the matter, which was Joe Burrow is almost a paradox when it comes to the Bengals fan base. He represents a security in the sense that he is the one thing that can elevate this franchise into not being irrelevant anymore. And you said that, 5 years ago, they had 5 straight playoff appearances. Before that, they had a couple division titles with Carson Palmer. At the end of the day, though, regardless of the recent failures that they've had in not making the playoffs, they're still, by and large, an irrelevant NFL franchise. They are still a poorly run franchise. Those are things that are indisputable, even when someone like Stephen A. Smith says it. I don't think that that's necessarily anything new and would have changed in their minds had they had more relative success in recent years. So Joe Burrow, now that he's solidified, and he already did a couple weeks ago, but now that he really, really solidified his lock standing as the number 1 overall pick, Bengals fans have attached to him. They've grabbed hold of him. They're like, this guy is ours, and there's nothing you can do to say that. And that's something I actually tweeted at the end of the national championship game. Like, people are saying, you can say all you want about this, but there's not a damn thing you can do about it. They're not trading down. They're taking Burrow. It's an inevitability. It's going to happen. Bengals fans have established that identity upon themselves. So he represents the security to take them from a place that they have, to take them from the place that they are now to the place that they've never been or haven't been since like Boomer Esiason was the quarterback. At the same time, Joe Burrow has opened up a ton of insecurities for Bengals fans that even I wasn't aware that existed, because these jokes aren't anything new. Like, Robert Mays is a fantastic guy. He's a great human being. And he made a joke that basically everybody in the national media has already said, because the perception of the Cincinnati Bengals is 100% true. They are cheap. They are poorly run. It's the same management for 30 years, and they haven't had a playoff win. You can't defend that at that point, even with the relative success that they had 5 years ago. Like, those jokes aren't anything new. And now that that Bengals fans have the sense that they can get out of irrelevancy, they go completely on the defense. And it's equally, to me, hysterical as it is embarrassing. I don't understand where this insecurity is necessarily coming from. And I think it also just is a testament to just fandom in general. Like, in recent weeks, I've just seen so many just rash cases of just tribalism. And now that the Bengals fans feel like that their team that doesn't really care about them can be good again because they have this asset in Joe Burrow, these same jokes now hurt a little bit more. And my advice to anybody who feels this way is just not take it that seriously. These are jokes. These are just things to get off for retweets and clicks and likes and whatever. This is not anything new that we've heard over the past however many years that Twitter has even existed. Like, the Bengals are in the same state of relevancy as they have been since the 90s in the general eye of the public because they haven't done anything past the first week of January, and you can't dispute that. At the end of the day, it just is what it is. So yeah, like I understand like your initial frustration, but just everyone needs to just calm down. These are jokes, and they're gonna have Joe Burrow to figure this out anyway. So at the end of the day, like just take a chill pill. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, understandable. And there are a lot of different things. By the way, when you said inevitability that the Bengals will be selecting Joe Burrow, I think that was even exacerbated a bit by some recent news that Zach Taylor has contacted the Burrow family and Joe Burrow to get his butt down to the Senior Bowl to try and meet him at a minimum. If he's not going to play in the game, try and meet him, get to know him, get the coaching staff exposed to him. So, obviously they are showing very early on that they are heavily interested in that kid, and rightfully so. You mentioned this, they're jokes, and take it easy, take a chill pill. True. You're right. That's definitely true. However, was the same thing being said about the Arizona Cardinals, a team that is not really run very well just a year ago when Kyler Murray was going? The family there that owns the Cardinals, they've been under scrutiny. Was it a couple of years back when the Rams had the first pick and they took Jared Goff and the Kroenke family, when they're, a lot of people are pissed at them for moving and all that kind of stuff? Was this a narrative? I don't seem to remember being. Now, granted, maybe I'm just too close, right? Maybe I'm too close to it, and maybe it's coming at me because my social media is Bengals focused. But I just don't remember the chorus line from national media members one day after the kid wins the national championship. Not even 24 hours after the kid wins the national championship. Don't go there. Don't go there. Your career is going to die. Don't go there. Don't go there. It's a little frustrating. I understand that it's clickbait. We're playing first take stuff on our show here, so I get it. But I think you mentioned insecurities. There are a reason for it. There are reasons for that, and we've said this a bunch of times. I don't think Joe Burrow is going to be the kid that bails out and says, "I'm not going to Cincinnati." But we played the Carson clip last week. How long can this marriage last if it's going to be more of the same? I think it's not so much right away he's going to want to get traded and not play for the Bengals, which, by the way, has happened with this team before, either during the draft or after. But, how long is this marriage going to last, and will it end in acrimony like many other relationships with the ownership family has done in the years past?
But that's the whole. That's why these things still happen, because they saw what happened at the end of Carson Palmer's tenure. They basically ran him out of town. They saw how they handled Andrew Whitworth. They're now seeing how it might end for AJ Green. They're seeing these great players go to Cincinnati. Most of them, or if not all of them, were drafted, so they didn't really have a choice in the matter. And then their careers ended in Cincinnati on a bad note, and then somehow they managed to thrive. When they leave. And then this leads me to another point where it's almost like Bengals fans are now having, again, going back to insecurities and whatnot, it's now this sense of entitlement where it's a sense of we deserve Joe Burrow. So like Robert Mays when he said, we can't believe we're sending this guy to Cincinnati, and there's some other people saying Cincinnati doesn't deserve him. That was more directed towards the franchise and the way that they're operated. And then, sometimes people can, like you said, can group the city and the fan base into it all. The fans don't deserve anything. Like fandom in itself is self-induced stress relative to the success that the team is. Everybody who's a fan of the Bengals has free will to change their mind. It's just a matter of they chose to invest their finances, their emotions, their spirituality. Fan comes from fanatical, which is a religious zealot. That's like the origin of the word in general. It's a clinical insanity in a sense. And being a Bengals fan in the last 30 years can be classified as a clinical insanity. That's why some jerk or some clown from Ohio wants to have medical marijuana for being a Bengals fan. Because it's insane at this point, because nothing changes. And everybody from the 49 other states see this and they say this organization's still a joke. So you're just a random fan who, again, the organization has no idea you exist, and you chose to devote your love and passion for a team that has no idea who you are. You don't deserve anything. The city doesn't deserve anything. The Bengals don't deserve Joe Burrow. That's right, but it doesn't matter, because that's not how the draft works, and that's never how the draft has worked. The draft, in its sense, is unfair because it sends the best players to the worst franchises every year, but that's the reality that we live in, and we accept it, and that's how these things go. So the point is, Joe Burrow is going to come to Cincinnati. He's going to do his best to turn things around, because he's the only thing that can turn things around. The only thing that can turn a franchise that's run like this around is a franchise quarterback that can elevate the talent around him. That's the kind of guy that Joe Burrow is. We'll see where it goes, and we'll see if this relationship ends in a better way than it did with Palmer, Whitworth, and potentially Green now. But these narratives exist for the reasons of the past failures of this franchise, and the fact that they haven't progressed past the divisional round in over 30 years.
Okay, so we talked about Palmer last week and how Palmer said he was tired of basically banging his head against the wall, pounding his fist on the table to get more help, invest more resources. Didn't happen, okay? Cincinnati hasn't really shown much in terms of change. They've added a couple of scouts here and there. New coach finally. Bigger coaching staff under Zach Taylor than previous with Marvin Lewis. Little things, right? It's also been 17 years since the Bengals selected Carson Palmer number 1 overall. And we kind of asked this a little bit. Do you think that this ancillary noise, do you think that learning from the Palmer situation, do you think that in any way is going to prompt any sort of change with a Joe Burrow to potentially invest more resources to protect what will be their most valuable asset since Palmer, if not even before that? Do you think that there's going to be any kind of change, or do you think that it's going to be, they're going to run with their same philosophy, and they're going to hope that this kid carries the franchise on his shoulders, and maybe they'll add a couple pieces here and there, and that's about it?
I think it comes down to how they hit or miss on these next few drafts. I think that this draft is going to be primarily, along with drafting Burrow, trying to build around him. They're going to have more money in free agency to potentially add maybe 1 or 2 more solid starters to the list. Depending on how much they turn over the roster, that's going to impact and factor on how active they are in free agency with the typical players that they sign. But you have to think back to in the early 2010s when they were rolling off good draft after good draft after good draft for 3 years after they drafted Dalton. They didn't really need. Okay, they still needed to be active in free agency, but it didn't hurt them like it did, in the later 2010s when they were, whiffing on drafts consistently, and specifically in the earlier parts in the earlier rounds. So when they were successful drafting in the early 2010s, they got away with being inactive free agency because the roster was already in a great place. It set up success for the next few years. It set up Dalton's success. They had a good team around them. They got really lucky for being that successful at drafting. If they continue to whiff on early draft picks in the first couple years after Joe Burrow or after he's been here, that might spur change in terms of their philosophy and how they build around, because they have to realize that they only have a certain amount of time before they give Burrow what at that time could be like a $250 million contract.
Right.
It's going to be expensive to keep him with the way that the salary cap is going up. So they only have a minimum window to invest in outside talent, but I don't think like it's possible that they could have this epiphany this year and somehow, manage to buy a good team around Burrow in his first 2 years. I think though that if that happens, it's because they realize that they haven't been good at drafting for the past 5 years, and that's really hurt them, and they have to do more on that. But if they don't, it's going to take continual bad drafts after drafting Burrow to really, I think, spur that philosophical change.
Look, I mean, you're totally right. I don't know. I don't know what the media expects the Bengals to do with this. Are they expected to look at? Oh, you're right, Stephen A. Smith. Let's trade out of this pick and not draft Joe Burrow. You're right. We don't deserve him. We're going to screw him up. I mean, I don't know exactly what they're trying to accomplish with that, other than generating conversation in which they are.
Well, he's not telling the Bengals what to do. He's telling them that we have to stop this somehow. Which
right.
Is not. It's just
not feasible. No. It's not. It's not going to happen. Absolutely not. But we've said this a bunch. They need to protect and edify that asset. If they bring in Burrow, you got to give them every chance to succeed. And you would hope that they have learned some lessons from Carson Palmer and other situations in the past that have burned them and have earned them this reputation around the league. It's just funny to me that, because this wasn't one bad season, the anomaly bad season in which the blow up was going to occur, and they happened to have, the number 1 overall pick for the first time in, like ever type of thing. The old narratives come back. It's just, and it's interesting to see how much that's come back into play. And look, I mean, I don't think Burrow's going to say trade me or I'm not playing for you. I don't think the Bengals are going to trade out of the spot. I think Joe Burrow is going to be in Cincinnati. It's just a matter of how the Bengals end up helping out their young signal caller going forward. I think, like you said, John, I think the draft is going to be key. And one of our listeners here, trying to find it here, but basically saying free agency is going to really tell us how things, if things are changing. And that's accurate. That's accurate. And we're going to talk a little free agency tonight, but hey, Joe Burrow, impressive national championship game, incredibly impressive season. And he appears to be falling into the Bengals' lap here, despite the chagrin of some national media members, pleading their case. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You can get this show on any number of audio platforms. Please subscribe to our channel so you make sure you get all of the most updated shows of the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network on the SB Nation's network of podcasts. You can also catch the videos to our show on YouTube, and all of our content is on cincyjungle.com. Well, we've been talking a bit about the national championship game, John. We usually do 2020 prospect watch and name a couple, we kind of pick one kid out of, I don't want to say thin air, but we pick some people just from kind of random schools, not really a rhyme or reason necessarily. This week, we're going to go a little bit different. I think we wanted to highlight some of the guys that really stuck out in the national championship game, not named Trevor Lawrence, not named Joe Burrow, guys who are eligible for the draft, that sort of thing. And there were quite a few on both sides of the ball. Where'd you want to start? Did you want to go? I know the Queen kid was talk, the linebacker out of LSU, had a fantastic game for the Tigers and really elevated his draft stock going forward. What do you think about him?
The whole thing, like Queen, I think has since declared for the draft, and for good reason. After coming off that game, like that seemed like the obvious decision, even though it may have been made a little hastily because I think he's a true junior, 3 years of playing experience, maybe only 1 year of starting experience, and the production is just not there from a profile that projects well in terms of becoming a solid NFL player. And it's really just banking on him taking this momentum towards the end of this year and carrying it over into his rookie season, into his NFL career in general. But the explosion is clearly there. The athleticism is there. And I think that pops off the screen when you watch him. That obviously, that entices Bengals fans everywhere because their linebackers are still, look like turtles aside from Jermaine Pratt.
Yeah.
But, the power, the hit power is there. He was able to stay in his run fits, stay in his gaps. Again, but like the lack of production from a career standpoint kind of startles me a little bit. Only 37 solo tackles and 20 solo tackles the year before that. Doesn't bode well for the long-term projection, but I think this is a guy that you would bank on just getting better over time. And maybe had he had stayed for a senior year, he would have produced a little bit better and his profile would have therefore looked a little bit better. But you bank on athleticism at the position, and you would hope that the end of his year kind of carries over into his rookie year in the NFL. I don't know where he's going to get drafted. I've heard some people say that he's now going to be rising into the second round. If he's the pick at 33 or they trade back in the second round, pick him up, I think he's an asset to covet and potentially develop into a starter. But he still has a lot to prove, in my opinion, because he's only had a few really good games this year, and the lack of production really speaks to that.
Yeah, the big thing is the big jump in tackles for loss from last year. 11 games last year, only 5 tackles for loss. 15 games this year, 12 tackles for loss. 3 of those were sacks. So, kind of a big jump there. A kid who, decent size, 6'1", 230, can do some things, and I like you said, it's hard to. He had a really, really nice national championship game. It's hard to gauge exactly where his trajectory is at the moment. Is he a player continuing to improve, like you said, or is he a guy who kind of peaked a little bit and is going to kind of ride the lightning, so to speak, into the draft and kind of help his professional career and maybe get overdrafted based on what he has done. If he stays for a senior year, is he a guy that's going to give you kind of just similar and not continue to show that upward arc? In the Clemson game, the national championship, 8 total tackles, 2.5 for loss, including a half sack. So he was all over the place. He really was. And a guy that I think probably could be at worst a rotational player at the next level, and should be a contributor at some point for a team. Maybe it's the Bengals. I would say you probably think no higher than a 3rd round pick on a guy like that, which is where the Bengals like to draft linebackers quite often, especially recently. So we'll see if he's in the cards there going forward. One guy that I personally kind of like, and that was just mentioned by Rob Duncan in our live YouTube chat, Thaddeus Moss, the son of, he's kind of a tight end for the Tigers, the son of Randy Moss. You see the stats here up on the weird kind of career trajectory here for him. But this last year, 12 games, 47 catches, 570 yards, 4 touchdowns. Not an overly fast guy. Pretty big. He's about 6'3", 6'4", about 240 pounds. Kind of a nice red zone, short yardage threat. Made quite a few plays for the Tigers down the stretch here. Kind of conflicting opinions about him, though, John. It feels like some people think that, he's at best a day 3, maybe even a late day 3 guy. Some people think that he could be a night 2 guy. What do you think about him?
When I was watching the game, my roommate was like, "Yeah, he looks pretty good, but he's kind of pudgy." I'm like, "His name's Thaddeus. What do you really expect?"
I know.
Like, come on, Randy. Like, I know you're from West Virginia, but Thaddeus, like, really? Like, I don't know. No, like, I think he caught a touchdown.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he had like the first 3 targets, I think, for Burrow too. So he was apparently with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Thaddeus Moss was a part of the game plan pretty early on, which may speak to what matchups they saw against Clemson. But yeah, in terms of just a nice possession guy, a nice guy that can get open over the middle, I think he has some value there. On when talking about the Bengals specifically, there's not a lot of room for tight ends in terms of involvement in the offense. So, the thing about LSU that you always loved before this year was that their offense did a great job of highlighting tight ends in the blocking game, and I don't really know how he is in that aspect, and that's obviously going to impact some part of his draft stock as well. But the bloodline is there. The athleticism is nowhere near his father, obviously, because he's just a different type of athlete. But the hands are there, and he might just be a solid targeted guy late in the draft.
So let's continue on with some. And I agree with you, by the way. And one thing, I see a lot of people saying, Moss looks kind of slow and a little cumbersome when he runs, type of thing. Not exactly a burner, and I agree. But if you actually watch that touchdown catch he made and kind of tight roped his way to right in front of the pylon, he's had a few plays like that, and I think that his footwork is really impressive for his size, and he's a little more nimble, not necessarily straight line speed type of thing, but he's got good feet, and that'll help him in route running and all kinds of things. So I wouldn't be comfortable really spending too much higher than a day 3 pick on him, but he could be a guy that could be a nice security blanket for a Joe Burrow. He is, by the way, Joe Burrow's best friend on the team. So, may not be a bad idea to at least bring him in for a workout, a look, wherever it may be. May not be a bad idea if you really want to surround your quarterback right away with some comfortable players he's comfortable with.
And just real quick, another position that the Bengals don't need running back, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
He's a fun player, man.
He's so much fun to watch. That DeAndre Swift from Georgia got a lot of hype this offseason because he has the best dead leg juke. But that one against Clemson in their own red zone when he just ethered the guy out of existence, it was man. Awesome. Again, they don't need a running back, but every team in some capacity needs a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and if they have the chance to draft him on day 3, I would heavily consider it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Let's keep going on the Tigers. What about Justin Jefferson? This is a kid who really, over the past few weeks, has really risen his stock as well. It seems to me like he's a player that kind of does a lot of things pretty well, but he's not overly dominant maybe in a lot of different in one specific category, I guess you could say, with the massive amount of catches. He's got good hands, 111 catches on the season. He is a scoring threat, 18 touchdowns, so a really nice season for him. Some people kind of think, he is a guy that has played himself into the first round conversation. Some people think he's still top of second. What are your impressions of the kid? Do you think he is a number 1 receiver in the NFL?
I think Odell Beckham thinks it because he slipped him about $1,500 bills on the end of the game.
Yeah, I didn't understand that one, but
I understood. I just questioned it. My unprofessional and completely, my unprofessional take on it is that 80% of the highlights of Joe Burrow involve Justin Jefferson in some capacity. That one insane throw against Texas, that was Justin Jefferson. The one insane throw against Georgia, that was Justin Jefferson. Like you said, athletically doesn't really pop off the screen. He's not going to blow up the combine in any capacity. He's just a concise route runner. I think some would say he's the second best route runner behind a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Just a great feel for the position. Obviously productive in this system with a competent quarterback for once. The 18 touchdowns is cool. I don't think he's a great jump ball receiver, though. I think that's mainly been Joe Burrow's specialty of just throwing those back shoulder fades that the cornerbacks have just had no chance on. Obviously, Jamar Chase is the more talented guy. He won the Biletnikoff Award for good reason. And you just look at who the Bengals have at receiver right now. They have a guy like Jefferson, and obviously who Jefferson would love to become in Tyler Boyd. So that type of niche role is basically already filled. And they have a bunch of other guys that can kind of work underneath. Stanley Morgan, Alex Erickson kind of fits the mold. And then you have a guy like Auden Tate who can outbody guys. So in terms of where he would fit in this team, he's still talented. And I think in the right scheme, he can still be a solid pro. It's just the lack of over the top athleticism. The because that offense needed Chase to really stretch the field vertically to allow Jefferson to work underneath. And I don't think this obviously working with Burrow would help because he's got the chemistry. But in terms of what they have right now, I don't think it would be the best role fit, I guess, for him, because all the roles that he would succeed here are basically already taken with guys under contract.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Tyler Boyd, because when I was thinking about this in pre-show and talking about Jefferson, I saw some similarities to what Boyd does with the Bengals, and you kind of have to have an internal discussion about the vision for your offense, right? I mean, there are kind of two schools of thought. You have a versatile, a diverse group of wide receivers where you've got, do you want this group, the one with the big guy, Auden Tate, who is your red zone guy, your jump ball guy, that sort of thing. You've got Tyler Boyd, your Swiss Army knife guy. Maybe you keep John Ross, he's your deep threat, and then you add in a guy like Jefferson who does what Tyler Boyd does. Or do you want to do what the Rams did, kind of have some similar guys with similar skill sets, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, the yards after the catch, they kind of you can kind of interchange them a little bit, that sort of thing. I don't know. It depends on what the Bengals want, but I think I'm on the same page with you that I feel that Jefferson maybe does a little bit what Tyler Boyd does. Where do you want to go next?
I think we can go to the other team. We can stay at the position with T. Higgins for Clemson.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I just remember last year in that championship game against Alabama, it was Justin Ross who really took over that game.
Yeah,
and then this year it's been Higgins who's been like the main guy. He has 13 touchdowns to Ross's 8. Only receiver on that offense with over 1,000 yards receiving. That one play, I think it was the reversed handoff in the backfield, and he basically exploded down the left sideline and ended up getting in for what was Clemson's last touchdown of the game. So there were perceptions about him going into this game being not like an Auden Tate guy, but a guy that's not going to wow you over the top vertically in stack cornerbacks necessarily with pure speed, but the acceleration with the ball in his hands, it was definitely kind of eye opening for someone who didn't watch a lot of him during the regular season. But there were a lot of draft pundits who are like, yeah, this guy's a lot more athletic than you may think, but he's 6'4", 215, and he's got a lot of ball production to his name. So I think in the worst case scenario, if the Bengals don't retain AJ Green, he's a guy that I think could fit that role pretty good as just a pure X guy in the top of the second round. I think depending on how he tests and whatnot, he brings a lot of the traits that would have been lost with AJ Green. A guy who can go over the top of a cornerback, can run most of the route tree, and can make damage after the catch. So I think Higgins has unlike Jefferson, has a skill set that would be definitely in what the Bengals would need if they lose AJ Green.
Yeah, and you look at the stats here. The big thing is the average yards per catch, right? 20.3 is as a freshman, and another 19.8 this last year with Clemson. So big play opportunities with him. 15.9 as a sophomore, nothing really to scoff at. But really, when you're hovering around the 20-yard mark for 2 of your seasons, and you've got 27 receiving touchdowns in 3 college seasons, that's pretty good, I would say. So intriguing guy, as we all know, John, especially in this draft class, this is a very stacked wide receiver draft class coming out. These fringe guys that you said top around 2 for Higgins, maybe, this is how these guys run and how they work out, some of the numbers they put up, that's going to really dictate if they are going to be in the first round and be late risers, or if they're going to be a second, third round guy a little later than we think. Let's end it here. By the way, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and we're doing a different version of our prospect watch list, kind of talking through some guys on that we saw in the national championship game. Let's talk about. I think he's going to be eligible. AJ Terrell, the cornerback of Clemson. I thought, initially, I thought it was a valiant effort, along with many other Clemson Tiger players. But, as Joe Burrow kind of had his way, there were some exposed areas of that defense. What's your take on Terrell?
Yeah, the Terrell's guy that I highlighted on this show.
Yeah, I remember that.
For the prospect to watch, and I think you saw a lot of the things that make Terrell a good prospect and also make him very questionable in terms of where he might go. The length, the physicality is there with his handwork when he's in bump run coverage, but you saw him get kind of exposed in run defense a couple times with some poor tackling. And then for the most part, for the first quarter and a half, he was handling Jamar Chase pretty well. And then unfortunately he got burned and maybe potentially pushed off on the first touchdown of the game. But regardless, like there's a lot to like, but there's a lot that makes you say this guy kind of looks like Drake or Patrick. And with Dre, there's some good, there's some bad. I don't know if Bengals fans want to go through that again, but again, it'll be interesting to see how he tests. I think he's got a decent resume to him, a guy that can go in the second day of the draft. Obviously the pedigree that comes from Clemson helps, but there's some traits like this trace not. I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't mention potentially the best player who's not Joe Burrow in this game is Isaiah Simmons. And if the Bengals had a quarterback, I would advise them to take Isaiah Simmons.
Yes.
He's a god.
Isaiah Simmons is a man among boys on defense. He is a guy who kind of did it all. I think he had a sack in the game lining up off the edge. He was moving laterally in the middle of the field, making plays. Very, very impressive player. He's supposed to be a first round guy? I mean, right? He's supposed
to be top 10.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Top 15. What I was going to say. So, very, very impressive player and a very impressive performance by Simmons. So, really like that kid. What about one guy? And we can end on this kid going kind of back to the Tigers. What about Chason? He was a guy that was a monster against Oklahoma, and I thought he kind of had some questionable plays against Clemson. Now, granted, it's Clemson, but he didn't have the same big play impact, I didn't think, this week. Kind of a tweener build in terms of where he's going to be in the NFL. He's got the height, maybe needs to bulk up a tiny bit, but a guy that may be in that mid first round if people are so inclined. I thought he kind of had some questionable moments in the national championship game after having a great college football game against Oklahoma the week prior.
Yeah, and I think he pressured Lawrence a few times. And I think your opinion on Chason comes down to how much you value pressure against just tangible production, because I think Chason only had like 6.5 sacks this year, and he's propped up as a potential first-round pick, which to me, is kind of startling. But he tore his ACL, I think, at the beginning of last year, and this is his first real chance to start. But you look at the traits, the bend that he has is undeniable, and he can run around the arc, and he can lower his center, he can lower his core and rotate his shoulders, and he can avoid being punched by an offensive tackle, and he can bend around the edge better than maybe almost anybody in this class, aside from maybe like a Chase Young. So the traits are there, the production is not, and the fact that he's so young, I think he's only 20 years old, it does benefit him from getting better as he progresses in his career. It just depends on what team in the first round is going to take that chance that production eventually comes, because the pressure that he can generate is definitely there. The traits of an elite pass rusher are there. It just hasn't been actualized yet.
Yep. So a lot of interesting players that were on the field. Obviously, all eyes were on Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, rightfully so, but there were a number of great players outside. Oh, he tapped the red Solo cup. He's the seltzer has been imbibed. So a lot of different players that really kind of, I don't want to say flew under the radar, but with such the spotlight shining on the two quarterbacks, these guys kind of became a little bit of an afterthought. And, I did keep an eye on a lot of them, though. So good stuff, John. Good stuff. Do we want to do free agents as well?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, why not?
All right, we're going to do a free agent spotlight because free agency is actually happening before the draft. The Bengals have quite a few needs, so we've got a few minutes before we get out of here. We're going to maybe try to do this as well as the prospect watch, where we kind of continually talk about some impending free agents that the Bengals could target. Now, obviously, we have to play within the confines that is the Cincinnati Bengals in free agency. Affordability, needs, affordability. Did I mention that?
Yeah. Mention it again.
Yeah, affordability.
Yeah.
So, we kind of have to play in those confines. So, you had, I believe, was it an offensive lineman you wanted to highlight?
Yeah. So we're gonna start with Zach Taylor's former team. We'll see where we end at the end of the segment. But I'm gonna go with Austin Blythe, and obviously Bengals fans are going to be interested in what Andrew Whitworth does. Apparently, the rumor is that he's going to go back and re-sign with the Rams, so that's going to cost them money, and they potentially cannot pay everybody on the offensive line. And the offensive line really struggled this year, and Blythe was unfortunately a part of that struggle. But I'm talking about the 2018 version of Blythe, the guy who was the first-year starter in 2018 at the right guard spot, the spot that I think is going to receive the most competition aside from right tackle. I think they're not entirely satisfied with John Miller based off the reports of Paul Dehner Jr. So we could see potentially a veteran signing at that position, if not a high draft pick. So Blythe is a guy to watch, a guy who's entering free agency for the first time, started his career at the Colts for a year, but then moved to the Rams when they got good and hired McVay, and has breakout year in 2018 at the right guard spot. A guy from Iowa, I believe. So he's well accustomed to the zone blocking that the Bengals want to run, but didn't have the personnel to do so. Blythe gives them an option, another body, an athletic body that can allow them to run some more outside zone and stretch concepts. And when he was a full-time starter in 2018, he was one of the best young guards in the league at the time. Unfortunately, this year, that entire offensive line regressed. He started the entire second half of the season at center due to injuries, and in the beginning of the 2019 season, didn't really have that good of a year at right guard. There's a lot of weird stuff going on with that offense this year, and I don't think it's entirely indicative of the individual talent on that offensive line. But he was tasked to do a lot more. But I think the athleticism is still there. The ability to reach shaded three techniques and climb into the second level is still there. I think he's a body that is going to be relatively cheap compared to what other guards on top of the market are making, and gives them an opportunity to do what they really want to do. So I think in terms of competition for John Miller, that's not in the form of a day 2 draft pick. I think Blythe is the guy to look for in terms of where their price range is going to be.
Yes, some snapshot stats here, courtesy of PFF in 2019 for Austin Blythe. Offensive snaps played, tied for 17th, tied for 21st in terms of 3 penalties, and tied for 10th with 2 sacks allowed last year. I think we can look up. Yeah, so if you look up 2018, 0 sacks allowed. He did have the 2 penalties there, and he had a 24.1 or 24-point raise in or I guess drop, however you want to look at it, 24-point drop in 2019 from his PFF grade in 2018. So, which guy are you getting? It seems to be the question with a lot of prospects and a lot of guys in free agency. Which guy are you getting? You getting 2018? You getting 2019? You getting somewhere in the middle? Somewhere in the middle, I think would be okay. Do you see him as a starter? Do you see him as a guy that can? Or is he a spot guy or kind of a fight for it? I don't know. What
I see him in the same vein as Miller, a guy who can start for the right team, a guy who can compete. I think they're going to value the fact that he's played all 3 spots on the interior, and the fact that he's not this established guy who's a consistent high value starter. Because if he was, I think the Rams would have more interest in bringing him back. But again, I think the athleticism is there. I think the 2018 tape still exists. Taylor obviously remembers what he did when he was there. And just being next to a more competent center in Trey Hopkins, potentially against a more competent Fred Johnson at right tackle, it could bring out the best of him in terms of what he could do on a second contract.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go with the guy I wanted to highlight here. I'll go a little low-hanging fruit because we've talked about him a lot, and he is a guy that I think a lot of people have pegged because he is a guy that is at a position of need. He's young. He might be a little pricey and might, initially you might say, hey, this guy, could come in and, or is he on a restricted free agent deal? I forget. Corey Littleton. Need to double check on that. But
I think he is a restricted free agent.
Yeah. So the Bengals would need to give up some stuff for him. But regardless, you look at what he has here, very interesting player, active, 3.5 sacks, 7.5 the past 2 years. Not.
Oh wait, he's unrestricted. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Unrestricted. So he may command a little more money than what people think. He's not really the pass rushing linebacker per se, the edge rusher, the tweener type of guy. So he won't get that kind of money, but he could get a little more money than what would be what the Bengals are accustomed to spending, especially on a linebacker. But they need some help. You look at the amount of tackles the past couple of years, 125 in 2018. When he was a Pro Bowl player, and then 134 last year. So quite a few, 168 solo tackles the past 2 seasons as well. So that is pretty impressive. Active guy, big guy. He's, I think, 6'3", about 230. So, a guy that can do a lot of different things for your defense and really shore up things. My thing is this, John. If the Bengals were to make a couple of moves like an Austin Blythe, where even if he's a marginal upgrade or even a somewhat lateral move on the offensive line, and then they get kind of one of the better linebackers on the market and set to hit the market in Corey Littleton, the thing is then this, even if it's just additions you make in free agency, it opens up the draft and you can have fun with the draft. You can get some of these guys to load up on offense, right? If you get a Corey Littleton, you can go into the draft and say, let's load up on some of these skill position guys. Let's get a Moss. Let's get a Jefferson, a guy that Burrow knows. So there's automatic chemistry that's built there because we've taken care of linebacker, one of our biggest needs in free agency. So to me, I think you need to really look. You don't need to make A+ signings in free agency and really put yourself in immediate salary cap hell. But the Bengals have quite a bit of space to play with. They could use a guy like Corey Littleton. I don't know that he'd ever be a Pro Bowl player for them once again, like he was in 2018, but he's a guy that makes a lot of tackles, is around the ball quite a bit, is very athletic, and should be familiar to Zach Taylor, who was on that staff. So to me, I think Littleton makes a lot of sense. We've talked about him before on this program. I like the fit. I also like the fact that he is, I think, 26 years old, not set to turn 27 until November. So when you're signing him, he will still be 26 years old. You sign him to a 3-4 year deal, what have you. You've got a guy right up until he's 30 years old. And then, at that point you can cut bait if that's what you want to do, but you're getting him for supposedly the prime of his career. And if you look at the stats I mentioned from 2018, 2019, when he hit year 3 and year 4, you're seeing a guy who hit his stride. You're seeing, 5 interceptions the past 2 seasons combined, 7.5 sacks the past 2 seasons combined. Like I said, an immense amount of tackles the past couple of seasons. So I really like the kid. It's going to cost more than the Bengals are probably used to spending. But if you do that and then you kind of stick to maybe some of the same players that they are accustomed to signing in free agency, that would make it a win.
Yeah, and the thing to love about Littleton, did you say he went to a Pro Bowl in 2018? Was he a Pro Bowl?
I thought he did. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that because I feel like I remember before the beginning of the season he was like being talked as a potential a cut before the final rosters came out or something because he had some type of character issues. But regardless, over the past 2 seasons, 2018 had a coverage grade from PFF of 87.2, 2019 coverage grade of 82.3. He's a good player in the NFL at this point. 4 years into the league, 26 years old. He's got proven track record of being a valued linebacker in the modern NFL. And like you said, the Bengals are going to have Pratt at linebacker. They have Vigil as a free agent. They have Jordan Evans for one more year. And they're going to cut Hardy Nickerson and Leroy Reynolds. If they don't sign a linebacker for agency, they're going to have to rely completely on the draft for multiple picks and potentially a couple undrafted guys to even fill out that position group. So I don't know if they're going to feel forced to sign a linebacker for agency, but it kind of feels that way to actually get 4 or 5 decent guys at the position group because if they don't, Like, they only have 7 picks right now. I don't think they're going to take multiple linebackers. They did this past year, and they ended up cutting Deshaun Davis before the season began. So Littleton is a guy that obviously Taylor knows. He could be their most expensive guy, and I think most people would be satisfied with that because he's now a proven player in the NFL, playing for a guy that he's played with before. So I think it's possible as their one big splash signing because he brings value to what they don't have, and because that position group in itself is going to be completely eviscerated from a roster standpoint, and they just need bodies there in general. So might as well splurge when you can, when you have the space.
Yeah, and I think he did make the Pro Bowl in 2019, or for the I believe it was the 2018 season. So he did make it. He was designated, per the Rams website, he was designated as a special team starter. I think he does play on special teams, so I think that's part of it. But I think also, so many of the linebackers that are taken to the Pro Bowl are these edge rusher type linebackers, those sort of guys. So they needed kind of a traditional linebacker, and they said he was a special team starter. He does contribute on special teams, but he's a guy I think that would immediately come in and change the complexion of a defense. Gives you a great flexibility in the draft, I think, because then you can really focus on the offense with the high picks if you wanted to do that. And the future looks bright with a guy like Littleton and Pratt next to each other, in my opinion. So probably not going to happen, realistically speaking, because I think he's just going to be priced out of the Bengals budget. But a guy that I think could really help them right away if they choose to sign him. Good stuff, John. A lot to get to tonight. I'm glad my voice didn't fully give out. I got a little bit of the sniffles or something. My kid keeps giving me the bugs, man. I keep getting the creepy crawlies from the little guy. But
the creepy crawlies.
Yeah, the little bugs. But good stuff. We got to a lot tonight, including Joe Burrow, the media's narratives about the Cincinnati Bengals and their holding of the number 1 pick and potentially taking Joe Burrow. We got to many of the prospects that we witnessed in the national championship game, and we got to a couple of free agents that the Bengals should be targeting. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. This has been the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sharon. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You can get this show on a variety of different audio platforms. Subscribe to those channels. Get every episode as they come out, as well as our YouTube channel. And keep it to cincyjungle.com for all your news, opinions, analysis, breaking news, this show, all kinds of stuff on cincyjungle.com. And I believe, John, next week, is next week the week you're at the Senior Bowl, or is this when you'll be, or is it the week after? Wait, give us the dates. You keep teasing us with this. When are you there?
Oh, you want to know my whole itinerary?
I don't
right
need
now.
to know that. No, I don't need.
Okay. Well, my flight's Monday night. I have a joining flight in Atlanta. I'll meet up with Joe Goodberry there, and we'll get to the hotel Monday night. Then I'm leaving Mobile. Sorry, they get really sensitive when you say that wrong. Friday morning. So I'll be there from Tuesday to Thursday to cover the 3 practices. Should be here on a regular scheduled programming for Wednesday for the podcast.
Okay, sounds good. And so will we need to get you by phone, or you will be back?
Oh no, I'll be available to call in, but I won't be here for Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Well, we look forward to that. That'll be cool, man. It's the second year you're doing it?
Third year. Won't get to talk to Joe Burrow because he'll be in California training or celebrating, but I hope to talk to Zach Taylor or his assistants. So hopefully get that content for you guys.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We appreciate you getting us some good coverage down there, and for your contributions to this show and the Cincy Jungle website. You kill it, man. Love it. Despite a seltzer overload, you kill it, dude.
Yeah, I'm on seltzer like 300 out of 840 that I'm supposed to drink this week. So wish me luck.
Yeah, well, check that liver. Check that liver. Make sure it's all right.
Shout out Pitbull, 39th birthday.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And go to Cincy. Was it Cincy Shirt?
Yeah, CincyShirts.com. Located here in Cincinnati. If you're in Cincinnati, definitely check out one of their stores. If you're not and you want a shirt, definitely order it because they are running out of inventory. They are making them. Like, I walked into the store, before I even said anything, he said, "You probably want a Smoking Joe shirt." I'm like, "Yep." Well, that's all we're making right now. That's literally all their inventory is. But the demand is high. The inventory is now is lowering by the second. If you're not ordering and you want one, stop what you're doing and go to cincyshirts.com.
Well, it's a quality shirt, my friend. It's a quality shirt, and a lot of people in the live chat seem to enjoy it. So go to cincyshirts.com to get that, and I may have to get one, man. I may have to get one.
You absolutely should.
All right. Take it easy, everybody. We'll see you next episode.